Hi, I'm Scott Wrighton. I'm the city manager here in Decatur, and it's my pleasure to bring you these weekly updates on what's going on at your city government. It would be remiss of me to fail to note that we're very thankful for the response that we had from the entire community, but especially our first responders and the staff of the Public Works Department yesterday on Tuesday when we had such a downpour and isolated flooding in many places in the city. We're thankful that crews both in the Public Works Department as well as several of our public safety first responders just jumped right in to block access to flooded railroad underpasses and other places where there was flooding that was high enough that vehicles could be disabled. Related to the public safety response, I also want to take the opportunity to say that it's been a busy summer for our police department, but it's also been a pretty productive summer for our police department. You can visit the police department's website and their Facebook page for a little bit more information about this, but I want to cover a couple of the highlights. Since May 9th, they've had 189 criminal felony arrests. We've seized 35 guns, 5 stolen cars, a significant amount of cocaine and meth have been seized. And with regard to speeding, which I know many of our citizens are concerned about, even though we're about 15 officers down, despite some of our best efforts to try to improve that recruiting, and I'm confident that we'll get past that, that has had an impact in speeding enforcement, but we've never stopped doing speeding enforcement. And one of the measures that the police department does in order to make sure that in some of those critical areas where there is more irresponsible driving, perhaps than there's been before, in order to have a presence there, we have special assignments, officers who work overtime for just those purposes, whether it's a downtown assignment, a special event assignment, or a speeding assignment, then we're trying to cover those areas in that way. But our police department is doing a fantastic job, and they are making slow progress, not only with their patrolling, but also with some of the other programs that they're involved with. At the last city council meeting, for example, there was a violence reduction and sort of violence implications program with a local not-for-profit here in Decatur that collectively these efforts, there's no single strategy that's going to bring violence down and solve some of these problems. It's a collective effort, lots of different strategies, and through community development and the police department, we're working on those, and I believe continuing to move the needle. With regard to storm sewers, let me say that there's probably an inclination to think, well, if there's flooding underneath the NS Railroad Bridge on Main Street or at Jasper Street, that must be because the sewers are plugged up and not working. That's not the case. In fact, our Public Works Department is very up to date in how we make sure that the sewers are all cleaned on a regular basis. In fact, they're televised on a regular basis. That goes for both our sanitary sewers as well as our storm sewers. And of course, what was overtaxed yesterday was the storm sewer component of our system. Ironically, the City Council's agenda on Monday included a major project for rehabilitation of manholes. That was on the sanitary sewer side, not on the storm sewer side. Let me mention this about storm sewers. Cities design their storm sewer systems to handle 5- and 10-year storm events. And if you have a storm event that's greater than that, there's flooding. Now, that doesn't mean that there's a failure in the system or that there's a failure in the city's planning process. The city could design and install storm sewers that would handle 25-year storms, 50-year storms, 100-year storms. But if we took the amount of financial resources necessary to build those kinds of storm sewer systems, we'd likely be doing very little else. There wouldn't be funds left over for other public works and police and fire and the other essential functions of city government. And so your elected officials have to make decisions about, okay, what is the appropriate level to make sure that we have good stormwater management and getting those rainwater discharges off of the streets and to our creeks, streams, and lake as quickly as possible, but without taking a disproportionate amount of tax dollars or creating an unreasonable burden on the taxpayers. And so that's how we do it. And so when there's torrential rains like we had on Tuesday, it overwhelms the system no matter how clean it is, no matter how up to date it is, for a short period of time. Thankfully, the founders of Decatur had the wisdom to lay the city out on the highlands rather than in the lowlands next to the Sangamon River, which has avoided a lot of flooding that would otherwise affect us. But any stormwater system can be overwhelmed if enough comes down all at one time. And here in Decatur, those who are lifetime residents know that shortly after the rain subsides, and sometimes even before, once it slows, it gets off fairly quickly. Certainly the Public Works Department is keen on identifying where we can make upgrades to our storm sewer system, so that if there's additional runoff as a result of development, then we're staying ahead of that by upsizing certain lines. And these sorts of storm events are ones that help us make those planning decisions. But the fact that there was water that accumulated for short periods of time underneath some of those railroad underpasses doesn't mean the system isn't working. It means that the system was simply overwhelmed for a short period of time. I look forward to bringing you more information in the following weeks about other topics. Next week I'll probably talk to you about ambulance and some other topics that have been in the news lately. So until then, thanks for tuning in. I appreciate it.